favorite albums. So this seemed like the natural progression to do. And just before we get started, I am not going to include any anime. Anime could be its own separate list that I could do at a different time, but this is not anime. That's not to say that there aren't going to be cartoons on this, but it will not be Japanese animation. Also, this is my favorite series, so not necessarily what I think is the best. This isn't an objective list. These are just the things that I enjoy watching. Okay. With those ground rules established, let's go to the honorable mentions. I started with an original list of 16 shows. So these were the 6 that did not make the cut for the final 10. We have Parks and Recreation, The Haunting of Hill House, Community, Nathan for You, House MD, and C-Lab 2021. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about these because they are just the honorable mentions. So spoiler alert, I do have The Office in my top 10. And this is where it kind of gets weird for me because I personally feel like Parks and Recreation is a better show than The Office. I think that the characters and the storylines are a bit more grounded. I think that the overall quality of the show is better and remains more consistent throughout. Whereas towards the end of The Office's lifespan, it certainly took some dips in quality. But if I'm being subjective, I just personally prefer The Office better, even though I recognize that Parks and Rec is a better show. The Haunting of Hill House is one of the best pieces of psychological horror I've ever seen. Definitely, stayed with me for a while when I watched it for the first time. And then they followed it up with The Haunting of Bly Manor, which, while very good, it did not, in my opinion, reach the same highs that The Haunting of Hill House reached. Although it did have Raul Coley in it, and I love that man, so that was fun, but Haunting of Hill House, extremely, extremely good. Just personally did not make the cut for me. Community. Watching Community got me through, basically all of my high school years. You have Donald Glover, during the kind of his rise to fame a little bit. Now, I had grown up watching him on Dare Comedy on YouTube back in the day, but that's neither here nor there. Of course, Community is what introduced the world to Alison Brie, who has gone on to do a lot of things. Ken Jeong, of course, and I can never remember the guy who played Jeff, the main guy, his name. He did that show, The Daily Soup or whatever, for a while, I think, but the reason Community didn't make my final list is I just feel like it kind of petered out, and there's a real dip in quality towards the latter half of the show, but the first 2 or 3 seasons were very good. It just went downhill. Nathan for You is probably one of my favorite shows right now. I had to leave it off the list because I feel like I haven't been watching it long enough, if that makes sense. it's just like a little too new in my world. I've only been watching it for a couple weeks, really. I just discovered it, through YouTube clips pretty recently, and then from there, I've been watching it on Hulu, but maybe if I come back in a year and redo this, it would be in my top 10, but for now I can't do that. House MD. I loved House growing up. Used to watch it all the time. Fantastic medical, like mystery thriller type thing, but for me it just fell a little bit short of the cutoff line to make the cut. And C-Lab 2021, this is a classic Adult Swim animation. One of the earliest Adult Swim programs I remember watching back when it first became a thing. And I grew up in like the golden era of Adult Swim. They had all the just amazing bumpers that kind of like messed with you a little bit, like the sun is our enemy, and the owl, and the washroom, and pools closed, like all that stuff, all that old school Adult Swim, the bumpers, the old cartoons like Harvey Birdman, stuff like that. I grew up in the golden era of all that stuff, and it really influenced me quite a bit. And honestly, it's kind of disappointing now seeing what Adult Swim has become. I really do miss the bumpers and the music and stuff. Adult Swim introduced me to Flying Lotus. Adult Swim invited me to Jay Dilla, which like those are now two of my favorite artists of all time, so just really good stuff. And C-Lab 2021 is a series that has infinite rewatchability for me. Definitely check it out if you've never seen C-Lab 2021. Okay, let's go into number 10, and we have Ragnarok. This is a Netflix original series. The entire thing is filmed in Norway. And it's about this young boy who moves to this small town in Norway. He comes, he lives in a very poor family. They don't have very much money. He's kind of a loser. And like he's kind of this big, burly type of guy, and then he has a brother, an older brother who looks almost nothing like him and acts almost nothing like him, and I don't want to give spoilers away in this video because my aim with this video is to introduce you to things that perhaps you haven't seen before. And I feel like this is a series that isn't very popular, so I especially don't want to spoil this one for you. But it turns out that the main guy is Thor. He has the power of Thor inside of him, and it's sort of a coming-of-age story about him growing up, accepting these powers, accepting the responsibility, and learning to grow with them and control them. And I've talked about before, my heritage is Norwegian. I have a massive interest in Norwegian and Scandinavian culture, mythology, iconography, all that stuff. So for me, this series just hits on so many levels, and it's all filmed in Norway. They speak Norwegian, so you have to have subtitles on to watch this. There is an English dub, but I would not recommend the English dub. Just watch it in Norwegian with subtitles. Definitely recommend Ragnarok. It's on Netflix, like I said. They just finished up the second season a couple months back. I am not sure if it's been renewed for a third season or not, but hopefully it has. Okay, let's go to Office. Now, before you get angry and click out of this video, I feel like a lot of people on their list would have this a lot higher. But when you see the rest of this list, I hope this placement makes sense at least. For me, I grew up watching The Office. I grew up loving the show. I've probably watched and rewatched the series, I don't know, dozens of times. I've probably watched the entire series dozens of times, if I'm being honest. I can quote most episodes off the top of my head. It gets bad, but I just kind of feel like the more distance I put between myself and when this show was on the air, the more I sort of realize its flaws and realize it's kind of been overhyped to a certain degree. Because, I don't know, I feel like it was certainly a cultural sort of touchstone for millennials, people of my generation. And I think everybody kind of got swept up in it and the impact it had, but objectively, the more I look at it, the more I see flaws. That's not to say I don't love the show, because, I've seen hundreds of TV shows and this cracks the top 10. But I feel like I've seen a lot of people make these lists and they have The Office in their top 5. And I think if I'm being honest with myself, I can't really put it there. Now, for me, the best episode of The Office, and probably one of my favorite episodes ever of any television series, is Dinner Party. I think that's kind of the cliche response. That's the episode that everybody talks about, but that's just such an amazing, the script, the performances in that episode are just, when The Office is at its best, it's really at its best. And I really wish they would have just ended the series with Michael Scott leaving, because it probably would be higher up on my list if they did so. The last 2 or 3 seasons, it really kind of felt like they were just dragging a corpse through the mud. But anyways, number 8, we have Aqua Team Hunger Force. Another Adult Swim animation. This is one of the earlier Williams Street animations that came out that Adult Swim did. I believe that the characters Master Shake, Meatwad, and Frylock are based off of Hanna-Barbera characters that the production company got access to when they bought the building. And this is just it's always colored my humor, this show. I grew up, I was watching this probably every night, because Aqua Teen Hunger Force, I realize I wrote team, but it's teen, T-E-E-N, not T-E-A-M, that's a typo on my behalf. But they were 15-minute episodes, so they would put, 2 of them out back to back. And then they did the movie that came out in theaters. And it's always been a show for me I can go back and watch over and over and over. I have the Adult Swim app on my Roku, and they have all the episodes on there. They used to have the episodes on Hulu. They don't think they do anymore. And it's just been something for me that, like I said, it's always colored my humor. it's always, I quote the show all the time. A lot of people do not know what I'm talking about when I quote the show, but I quote it all the time. And it's just something that, laying in bed at night as a young teenager, like 12, 13, 14, this was always on around like 10 to midnight type hours. So I'd be laying in bed watching this, like falling asleep watching this, and it's just always been a show that I just absolutely love. And like I said, really kind of crafted who I am today. And on that same note, number 7, we have Tim and Eric Awesome Show. Another Adult Swim show. Tim and Eric are almost wholly responsible for my sense of humor today. Whether it's the absurdist comedy that they did on Tim and Eric Awesome Show, great job. With their green screen gags and just nonsense, non sequitur type humor. Or even their more modern things. On Cinema at the Cinema is a masterpiece. And I say that unironically. Tim Heidecker created an entire cinematic universe on Cinema at the Cinema. And you've turned this movie review web series into like a narrative world, including a fake music festival and a live streamed court trial with actual judges and lawyers. And if you have never watched the trial of Tim Heidecker, I recommend watching it. If you can't sit down and watch the entire 8 or 9 hour live stream, I would recommend just watching the highlight clips from the trial of Tim Heidecker, because it's insane and I still do not really understand how they pulled that off. There's no scripts, there's no set direction or anything going on. They just set up a camera and treated it like a real trial over multiple days, and it's insane. And then the outcome of that spawned Mr. America, a mockumentary about Tim Heidecker running for district attorney. And all of that spawned from On Cinema at the Cinema. And then you have Tim Heidecker also created a James Bond-esque show called Decker, where he plays an American secret agent who gets the job done at whatever cost, but the way he talks and fumbles over his words and all that stuff is just hilarious. Tim's Kitchen Tips, of course. This Tim and Eric Awesome Show has spawned so many different things that have just influenced who I am comedically and personality-wise. Not to mention Tim Heidecker's stand-up routine, where he just goes in front of an audience and purposefully bombs as hard as he can, reading jokes off of cue cards, saying jokes with no punchlines, things like that. I just absolutely love it. So number 7, Tim and Eric Awesome Show. I realistically could have put this higher, but I'm judging this based off of just their Adult Swim series, not the entire body of work the two of them have put out. Oh, also, Tim and Eric's $1 Billion Movie. $1 Billion Movie is one of my favorite theater experiences ever. They played it at this little independent theater out here. And there were so many, I think it was only 2 or 3 days only that it was showing. And there were so many people packed into the theater that people were sitting on the floor in the middle of the aisle and stuff. And sitting down in front of the seats. It was an amazing theater experience. We have a bunch of diehard Tim and Eric fans just watching this movie. Okay, moving on. number 6, we have the Twilight Zone. And this is, I'm strictly talking about the original Rod Serling series, the Twilight Zone. I feel like the Twilight Zone is like underrated for how scary it can be. I think people see it being in black and white and being so old and having sort of dated visual effects. But the Twilight Zone put out some truly terrifying stories and some stuff that will really like sit with you and resonate with you. And I feel like a lot of modern day horror, like even stuff being put out into movie theaters now, cannot hold a candle to the original Twilight Zone. Because they knew how to make things scary without like jump scares or visual effects. Just the premise of what you were watching was enough to make you scared. And of course, you have the iconic narration. Rod Serling coming in, smoking a cigarette or whatever, talking to the camera. And it just created this sort of iconic horror landscape that has persisted today, even though, people don't really talk about the original series as much anymore. I feel like it is very influential all throughout Hollywood and television. And you look at things like Black Mirror. Black Mirror is basically the Twilight Zone of the future or the 21st century in its own way. And I think that's really cool. Even though Black Mirror isn't on this list, I've always respected what that show does. Okay, now we're getting into the top 5, and we're gonna have to start the top 5 with Twin Peaks. In my opinion, I guess probably in many people's opinion, David Lynch's best work. He creates this world in this atmosphere that just sticks with you and it compels you to keep watching it. There's just something, you have a young Kyle MacLachlan just killing it in this role. I've always loved him as an actor. One of my favorite actors. He was in Desperate Housewives for a little bit. Loved him in that. And just, you have the Twin Peaks. You have this mystery. You have all these psychological elements and these sort of horror-esque elements. And it's just, I don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen it. If you've never seen Twin Peaks, I'd recommend just going out and watching it because nothing I can say would do it justice. And it's one of those things that is kind of hard to put into words what I like about it. But it's just the way they tell the story itself. Because on its surface, the story is pretty interesting. The disappearance of Laura Palmer and, Kyle MacLachlan's character going in to try and figure out what happened. But it turns into so much more than that. And it's just, it pulls you in and doesn't let you go. Number 4, Arrested Development. I think Arrested Development is responsible for a lot of the current comedic landscape and the current way we sort of view family comedies. I think like a show like Schitt's Creek would not be possible without Arrested Development existing. The meticulous comedic callbacks and the recurring jokes and payoffs that come out, they'll set a joke up, and it doesn't pay off until many episodes later. And I think a lot of television comedic writing could learn from Arrested Development. it's a shame that season 4, the Netflix series, was bad. But the first two seasons especially are very, very good. And there's so much you can say, but it's kind of hard to, like, say it. I feel like you just kind of have to watch the show, see the dynamic between the characters and the storylines and everything, and the way it all comes together. I'm trying to think, like, of how I want to say what I'm trying to think of. But there's so many, like, iconic lines and moments from the show. Arrested Development's been turned into so many, like, memes and all that stuff. And I feel like I quote this show all the time. Especially, like, her, that stuff. Hello darkness, my old friend. I've certainly, said that, the Job part. There are illusions, my gold tricks are what whores do for money, things like that. I just blew myself. You hear things like that around you all the time, and that's all coming from this show. Okay, number 3. So now we're getting to the top 3. And this is a show that I have really not seen on other people's lists, and that is Top Gear / The Grand Tour, but mainly just focusing on Clarkson, Hammond, and May. This show is so foundational to who I am as a person. It's insane to think about. I grew up all through high school watching Top Gear, their seasons. I've been watching since like season 3 or 4. And I've seen every episode probably a dozen times. This show is responsible for me, like, getting into cars in general. And also just like my humor, and there's something about this show and the camaraderie between the presenters and their chemistry and everything that just, I feel like it's almost impossible to replicate it. It has to come naturally, and for them it did. And I don't think we're ever going to see anything like it again once it ends. And unfortunately, it is close to ending, because the Grand Tour is no longer doing the studio-style shows that made Top Gear famous. When they announced that on the Grand Tour, that it was their last studio show in the tent, and they ran that little, like, highlight clip, I have to admit, I cried like a baby. I'm not afraid to say that. And it's just, it's a show that I can just put on, and it's like a comfort zone. I can just put on any episode of Top Gear, any episode of the Grand Tour, and just, it feels good to watch it. It's like you're at home, sort of. And, there's something really nice about it in a lot of ways. And, the spin-off shows have been good too. James May, Our Man in Japan, Ocock, Clarkson's Farm is very, very good. But anything with these 3 is just fantastic. And, the Top Gear specials or the Grand Tour specials, I probably watch them at least once or twice a month. Just throwing on, I'm on the computer, just throwing on the TV in the background or something, and that works for me. And, this is, like I said, I did not see this on many other people's lists. I watched a couple of these, videos before doing this, just to kind of see what people had on their lists. And I was really shocked to not see this mentioned much, because for me, this show was Well, like I said, the show is just foundational. And the current Top Gear cast, I don't know if Matt LeBlanc is still there, but they've tried a couple different things since the three of them left, and it just isn't the same. It just isn't the same. Number 2, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I talk a lot about some of these shows and how they crafted my sense of humor. Always Sunny definitely created my sense of humor. I think like at least 50% of what I say in my day-to-day life is quotes from Always Sunny. And it's the longest running, I believe it's the longest running live action sitcom now. They just put out their 15th season. And I'm not going to be one of those people who acts like there has not been a decline. The last 2 seasons have not been as good as the peak of the show. For me, the peak is like season 5 to season 11-ish. But there's amazing top-tier episodes throughout every season. Like 2 of my favorite episodes in the entire series came later on, which is the gang goes to the water park and the gang hits the slopes. Those are 2 of my favorite all-time episodes, and those are both in more recent seasons. Obviously, Nightman Cometh. That's like the biggest, most popular episode from the series, and I think Nightman Cometh is kind of what put the show on the map and made it more mainstream, but this might be controversial. I don't really even have it in my top 10. And yes, if you were wondering, I do have a top 10 ranking for Always Sunny episodes. Maybe I'll make a video about that sometime. But just a fantastic show. I have never related to any fictional character the way that I relate to Dennis Reynolds. Dennis Reynolds is like the characterization of the rage I feel inside me at all times. And Always Sunny is just a show that it's comfortable. Kind of like Top Gear, I can just put it on and watch it over and over and over. I've probably seen some episodes of the show probably close to 20 or 30 times. I can quote most of the series just off the top of my head. Like, give me an episode and I can probably read along with it as it plays out, or at least give you quotes or something from that episode just off the top of my head. So that's number 2. That's my silver medal. What takes place the number 1? What takes the number 1 place? Who got top spot? Well, for me, that is True Detective Season 1. I know there's 3 seasons of True Detective now. All of them are good. But specifically, Season 1 of True Detective is one of, if not the best season of television ever made. I said that this was a subjective list, and for the most part it is, but objectively, I believe that you can put Season 1 of True Detective against any other show that has ever been made, and you can make an argument for it being better. True Detective is kind of my litmus test. I have shown Season 1 of this show to so many people, and depending on their reaction, it kind of lets me know if I'll get along with them or not. Like every girlfriend I've ever had, within like the first month of dating, I'm like, listen, we're sitting down and we are watching Season 1 of True Detective. My friends, I'm like, we're sitting down and watching Season 1 of True Detective. I have watched this season of TV probably 10 or 12 times. It never gets old. It's such like an in-depth, twisting mystery compiled with fantastic characters and Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson just shining in some of the best performances of their entire career. And this show is basically responsible for the reconnaissance in the mid-2010s. You know, he did True Detective, then he did Dallas Buyers Club, Mud, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff, but there's the reconnaissance, and True Detective kind of jump-started that whole trend for him of doing these more serious, deep roles. And you bring in this, like, Louisiana backwater motif, which is visually very interesting. And you mix in these occult elements that I've always been into, like the occult and magic and witchcraft and all that stuff. And this kind of blurs the line between occult magic and reality and dark, like voodoo type horror, and it's just a fantastic series. I don't want to talk about it too much because my goal is for everybody who makes it this far, who has not seen this, to go see it. Also, I believe in, like, episode 5 or 6, they have one of the best single take long shots I've ever seen. And yeah, go watch True Detective if you haven't seen it. But that ends the list. So, I'd love to hear any feedback from you guys in the comments down below. I know that there are some pretty glaring omissions from this list. The Sopranos. My simple explanation for that: I have not watched The Sopranos. I've seen like 2 or 3 episodes. I need to watch it, but I have not done so yet. Breaking Bad. I don't like Breaking Bad. Could never get into it. I've tried many times. Can't do it. Game of Thrones. I don't think I even have to say why Game of Thrones is not on this list. But I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of this list. Which of these you agree with? Which of these you disagree with? What would be in your personal top 10 list? I'd love to hear it. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this every single day. Until next time, guys. Bye-bye.